You started a cybersecurity business in 2014, mainly focusing on government contracts. Then in 2020, moved your focus to solely on security software, doing around 1.2 million US dollars recurring revenue at the moment, getting the team up to 30, now down to 10 with that focus on the SaaS product. So congratulations on the growth.
This thing is letting go of someone that you know is doing a good job, but the needs of the company have deviated enough from what they're providing. And so this is especially true for a product company, right? When there's no services bench to throw people on, right? So that's the hardest thing, honestly.
G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Trewin. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Dennis Underwood from Cyber Crucible, based just out of Pittsburgh, United States. Thanks for your time today, Dennis.
Hey, thanks a lot, Troy. Good to be here.
Let's start with how we know each other. You emailed me a few months ago, and I thought you'd be a great guest to come on. As I mentioned before we hit record, a good mate of mine in Sydney was on our podcast a few weeks ago. He was also in cybersecurity and sold 2 of his companies for $47 million. Nick Elsmore. I'll link through to that in the show notes. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Underwood. We are a cybersecurity software business. We do use artificial intelligence, AI. We don't use ChatGPT. We're not a wrapper around that. I always treat it like when you go to a bakery, you're asking for a cake. You're not asking for eggs or flour or butter. And so we use AI, but we're not an AI company. We are a cybersecurity company that automated a lot of what you do in cybersecurity risk management.
And you just focus on clients in the USA or beyond?
Great question. So we started here, of course. So we started in the United States. We have clients in the US and Canada. We also have clients in the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa now, and also we're expanding in Europe. So it's been a good global reach. That pretty much is how software companies should work, right? When you have a product, you should be able to open up new markets fairly easily. There's no product to ship really, except for code. So expanding and selling this on a per Windows or per server basis is pretty easy to do internationally or domestically.
And how did you start out?
Depending on how far back we go. If you start looking at, when I first got into being an entrepreneur, I was trying to get my first IT job with a whole bunch of, we'll say older people like my age now, and they were getting laid off from work. And here I was, 18, 19, bumbling around trying to get a job. And they kept saying no because there were well-qualified people who could take the same job, right? And so what I did was I took a step back, and one day out of frustration, I turned around and I said, what if you hire me as a contractor? It's Dennis Underwood Inc. Which, of course, having no idea what I was just saying, but it was just out of frustration. They saw no pension. They could fire me whenever they wanted. It's a per project basis. And, I didn't know how to adequately negotiate a full-on rate, right? So they jumped at the idea, and so did I, and then I ended up having my first company there just out of necessity. Pay the bills. I was paying my way through college. What I did was I went ahead and I just kept that tradition up. I realized the flexibility gave me the ability to take classes, work around, my other priorities, which at the time were education. And that just kept on going. This is my third business now. My second one, I always say my first one, I learned how to be an IT person in a company, running a company. And then the second one was doing the same thing in security. And the third one was, hey, let's go ahead and see if we can make a piece of software to sell and remove some of the constraints that a business has on expanding if you have a very boutique, workforce that you have to choose from.
Fantastic. So what year did you start this business and how old were you?
This third business, I started this business in 2014. It is around 10 years old now. Until around 2020, I was doing all of my product development for the government, for the military. So it reminds me a little bit like watching your kid go to college. I'm not quite there yet. Give me a couple more years, but you would have this idea off of some customer requirement. You would create the creative solution. You would make it work. You would get it to customers. The customers might be like a military unit or a government agency. And then they say, this is awesome. And then they take it away from you, right? And then they say, here's a new problem no one can figure out. Go ahead and solve this one, right? And so what happened was kept having the invention being ripped out of my hands, and I was looking for a market opportunity. And then I saw a massive shift in the way hackers operate, and I didn't see that shift coming at all on the defender side. So essentially, you had a massive supply chain shift, the hackers, right? But you didn't have a shift on the supplier side, and so to customers like cyber defense companies. So I knew that anytime there's a massive shift in the market, it's just a matter of finding the opportunity, right? So I actually left behind a few million in revenue doing these products for the government, and went into this, put all in on this commercial venture. So Cyber Crucible, as it stands today, the product was first started in 2020, and we just had consistent revenue growth, consistent profitability growth, and I'm really happy to see. I mean, we're patented in Australia, we're patented in Korea, and Japan, and Canada, and a whole bunch of different places, and have been deploying globally now. And it's been a good, healthy start for a good business.
Right. And so how old were you 11 years ago when you technically started this business?
So I'm 46 now, so I guess that would make me 31, right? No, 35.
35, yeah.
And I'm a cryptographer. That's horrible. Okay. I get you leave that in to shame me.
Yeah.
So
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
absolutely, yeah. When I started with the software sales, I always broke out the software revenue as separate from the services. But internally, I had this secret little services count, because I had to know how mature the product was, and when actually the SaaS product would stand on its own without a whole bunch of very EBITDA dilutive services that tacked on. I started, I think, in 2021. I got about 50K in revenue, and that's it. We were deep in the red from an EBITDA standpoint, and then I had around 220 revenue, 220K maybe in 2022. 23, I jumped up to around 700. So it's healthy growth, right? And then in terms of gross revenue, in gross software sales, we did over $2 million, or just under $2 million last year. So that's a phenomenal climb, but it just shows it's working. What's most important is that, even though you saw the revenue to kind of very stably kind of go up, the margin started to recover, right? And so we ended up in positive EBITDA territory last year, because some of the efforts in automation and scaling that began a couple years ago are finally catching up, right? And so the results was a very healthy business, stable headcount, and now we're choosing who and when we add headcount to expand the business.
So is that $2 million a year recurring revenue just for the software side?
Yeah, I think the ARR, if you break it down, is around 1.2. 2 million is around cash. People are prepaying for the software. They know that we're increasing the price year on year, and we give them a little bit of bonus to pay cash up front, like any good entrepreneur, right? It helps because we're able to manage our cash flow as a normal business. We don't have to fit into some rigid ARR structure. But yeah, we did around 1.2, 1.3 million ARR last year. That's continuing to climb, which is phenomenal, and we're switching banks to one that's more international, just to keep up with the currency demands.
And so this service is on top of that 1.2 million.
I think 10K. I think it was basically, hey, if we got to make this sale done, we have to do something for this guy, and so, or tell a woman, hey, we'll help you out here. Here, just give me $1,000 kind of thing. They certainly weren't profitable services, but they got the deal done on the software side, which is what they wanted.
No, that's very smart. Obviously, businesses are very much more highly if they've got recurring revenue that's what you're building. That's very, very clever. And what about number of full-time equivalent team members you started with and where you're at now?
So when we started product development, I would probably say we at our peak probably had about 30 employees. A lot of those were engineers. We were building the product, figuring things out. There was a lot of counter examples we learned along the way. In project management, we learned to call them anti-patterns. And, the old light bulb that didn't quite work until we finally got the right one. And, right now we probably...
That was Thomas Edison when someone asked him, how did you keep going? You failed 10,000 times. And he said, well, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that it didn't work.
Right. And the sad part when I had all these brilliant engineers working was that even though I was the most experienced, that did mean I had the most bad habits that I had to unwind and figure out, almost like I see in movies where they're dumping stuff off the ship and they have to figure out what they want to keep and throw overboard. And it was kind of like, for me, I had the most to throw overboard, right? Because I came in with the most assumptions that I had to assess myself. But yeah, we ended up right now we have around 10 employees. We shifted from product to sales, and then from sales to now we're focusing on more of a hybrid channel and direct move for sales. That's actually working really well. And the direct is a way to basically create demand generation, and the partners, we try to make a friend along the way for every sale, right? So that means getting channel partners, knowing that they won't just sell the first one you're giving them, but they'll sell many more. And that's worked out well to keep headcount very stable while keeping revenue and pipeline growing.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Oddly, so I had to make some large adjustments to my sales team during that time. I'll say around mid last year, maybe, when I realized that the sales culture was not aligning with the product culture that I was building, and it just wasn't working, right? The costs were too high. I wasn't getting the revenue I needed. The sales people were costing more than they were bringing in. And when they were bringing in a sale, because we are a piece of software just selling on a per endpoint basis, this isn't like one of those deals like, I don't know, like an Accenture, kind of consulting engagement where you get this big 7-figure check at the end, but it was worth the bottles of wine and the MBA tickets and everything else, right? It just wasn't worth it, right? The MBA ticket sucked up all the profit for that sale and next year's, right? So when I dumped them, it was hard, and I was like, okay, this better work, and sure enough, we started getting clients coming back who responded to our sales message, responded to the efficient. They didn't have time anyway. They didn't want to have a schmoozing kind of sales culture. That worked well for me, and so I realized that, hey, this product is locked in enough and automated enough that I don't need MBA tickets to try to get someone to be my friend long enough to make the contract work, right? It always helps being the friend and giving respect and getting to know you and the product. But that's when I knew I had made it, is when the product was selling and they just needed someone to speak to about it and then let the product carry itself.
And what does success look like to you?
I've been setting out for quite a while to provide a real solution that would put power into the hands of the people that are buying the product, that it had to be a very empowering exercise. Security, it felt like, was always, a little mix of blame the victim and a little mix of, I always call it like Jack Tan's security. It would be Jack Tan's any industry, where almost like Wizard of Oz, where you're not quite sure what really works and what's real and what's not. But man, that marketing pitch and those fireworks were phenomenal, and so I wanted to turn that culture on its head with our product and do what they were going to do, which a lot of times in cybersecurity isn't the way things are done, right? Do it in a way that's very efficient and put people in charge, their security. Honestly, a little bit like in the 90s, which most of my employees weren't around then working, right? But a situation where you'd install your security tool and the security vendors will try to beat the hackers every moment, right? And that somehow shifted over the years to, let's give the customer 900 knobs to turn and then blame them for not having that 800th knob turned correctly to 11 or whatever it had to be turned to, right? And so my mission's been to get back to that. And so success for me is having that big impact. If customers value it, they'll pay for it, right? And having that impact in a way that is changing the culture in cybersecurity. That is happening already, even at our lower revenue numbers compared to some of our incumbents. I do see where the culture, there are some people following our marketing, which is phenomenal. And once I've accomplished that, then I'm probably going to, in cybersecurity culture, it's not an IPO, it's usually selling, but we'll see what the future holds. And then, carry on with the next project and my next idea. And probably after my time in the government, I'm probably on invention number 20 something, that is kind of say, you know what, let's try something completely different. I have the money now to do that. So let's see if I can learn about, I don't know, dialysis with AI or something. I have no idea, but that's the point.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
For marketing, what I might recommend is do the hard job of growing your marketing base organically with thought leadership and content. There might not be anybody on your webinar. There might be no one reading your post in the beginning. You just got to keep at it. I'm at 15,000 followers on LinkedIn, is where I focus most of my energy. I don't really know most of them, but it started with one, quite honestly, because when I left the military, I had no LinkedIn account at all, right? And one day I just sat down and I tried the easy way a couple times. That didn't work with like bots and buying followers and stuff. And I realized this needs to be done the right way. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to start. And Now I have, hundreds of people reading every single article, sometimes thousands or tens of thousands. But doing the growth hacking just has to mean persistence over everything else. And you'll get it right. You'll find your message, you'll find your voice, and that'll change over time too. But it's just starting on day one.
How did you fund your business?
I ended up using trailing revenues from the military products in the very, very beginning, right? And then I knew that I had to work quick and work in a very targeted manner with very limited funds if I wanted to get like an MVP in place, get a customer, prove that this crazy idea works. So it mostly was bootstrapping with a little bit of investment along the way. We're talking, $600,000-700,000 now or something like that. To as sales motions increase, the need for personnel to try different things, A/B test, and build out the product. Maybe it was for like, that European patent, things like that. Very targeted raises. And it's worked out really well where the founders haven't been heavily diluted, myself being probably the largest stakeholder. And early investors, one of the promises I made to them was, hey, I'm not out here to raise money. I'm here to build a business and the money will come with that business. Right. And that's made a lot of the angels pretty happy too, right? Because they're normally well diluted by now, right? And we haven't had to worry about that, which is a good place to be where I'm sitting, because I can focus my money and any future activities on growth, whatever that means.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Cybersecurity is very much saturated, and it is an industry where you can make wild marketing claims, and there's no kind of like karma police there to tell you, oh, you're not being truthful or honest, right? Because the nature of myself, right, and the ethos of our corporation, we're very much built on we do what we say we're going to do, and that we build products that work in industries where it's easy to see the products working is those industries are a better home for people that make bridges, right? Hollywood scenes are better for people who are good at making scenes, right? And so if I was going to start up again, because cybersecurity is so much built off of intangibility and inability for customers to really get a handle on what works and what doesn't in an easy way, I would definitely go for something that has a tangible outcome, something they can hold, something they can understand, they can test if it works very easily. I think back to that crazy guy who has the sales pitches. I don't know if you guys have them where you can slap that tape on like a boat or like an aquarium or anything, right? If it works or not, right? Dumb, but like you can see, right? That's a really hard sales pitch for cyber, right? And so we try our best, but I think if we did it all over again, I would pick an industry where the people who just want to get heads down and make something that works for people to hold and buy, and that's not cyber, that's something else, maybe medical.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
It's a hard line to walk between being too soft and too hard. Of course, we see too hard on TV, right? It's almost become like a cult of how evil can this CEO be, right? And then you spin that around, if you aren't hard enough, then you're out of a job, right? There's no money, there's no profitability. Earlier on, you have to make a lot of hard decisions. And one of the things that I've always had a challenge with is when you get into that hardened mode where you're like, I have to make some hard decisions that are probably going to hurt some people that I really like, or not give the customer what they want, or something like that. It's really easy to kind of stay in that combat mode, right? To then just keep on shifting that I don't know, ISR on, like, and keep shifting in the same manner instead of like turning that off and getting soft again, right? So it's always like a nice edge. So I always caution when I see people with some of the behaviors, I'm kind of like, oh, that pendulum keeps swinging. I know it's hard, and I try to always keep that balance, right? And so that's what I always recommend for people is, be there for the hard decisions. You got to put on that war paint, but then, it's also, there has to be a time to take that off.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
The part of the business that I've had to work the most on is actually marketing. I came from an engineering background, so I always came from a place where I could just tangibly show people, hey, it works, right? Communicating that to people that aren't my requirement source, right? Being able to communicate to a large audience, to multiple micro segments of that audience, that all takes work. It takes finding your voice. It takes knowing how to communicate with people in a way that you are next to that product. You help to build that product upon which someone has told you that part doesn't work. And you're like, I did it myself, buddy, So you have to learn to put on a little bit of showmanship and while you're communicating, and then to communicate effectively in multiple tasks. That's not always easy for someone who is very by the book, straight line. You get from A to B by just a straight, walking that path, right? Sales is not like that, right? So you really have to learn how to navigate and not just be linear like an engineer would be.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Fast growth plus bootstrapping means there is no room for fat at all. It takes a lot of discipline to be able to being in business, quite honestly. Every decision you make, whether it's spending or earning, has to be based on if you feel short term, okay, am I going to go out of business, right? Or is this going to hurt me in such a way that I'm going to have to go out of business? And then longer term, does this take my eye off the ball? Is this deviating the project path from what needs to happen to get to where you need to be, right? And so that means that you have to assess a lot of times and make a lot of decisions that you wouldn't want to make to make sure that you're not wasting money on things that you just can't afford to waste, right? Because if you don't, you may survive, but you're not getting the EBITDA positive growth, right? You are going to be stuck burning money, probably going and begging for money from investors or something like that. You will no longer be the master of your domain, and your vision will be at risk.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love that. As to the counter of that, as long as you can stay disciplined enough, you get to have a vision put into place where guaranteed, if it's a good vision, it's like the way the world works. Like you will have a line of people who told you that's a bad vision, won't ever work. You're not the one to do it. Whatever happens, right? There are a whole bunch of people. I think I read that Bezos, someone so at a conference told him that books is a horrible idea and he should sell now before it gets too bad. And he proved them all wrong, right? So when I look at how far we've come and how far we have to come, we've done a pretty good job of staying on track for our vision in our company, and that's a phenomenal place to be, right? To see that you were right and that you are helping people, which is not always the same thing, right, as being right, and that you're setting yourself up for helping a whole lot more people with your vision, and that's phenomenal.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
So there is a line in Star Trek that I saw, and it just recently popped up on social media, and it was that Picard was telling Data that you can do everything right and still fail in the end, right? And I thought that really hit me, because there's been so many times where you did everything right or you planned for the perfect, sequence of events, and then it doesn't matter, it was all right, and it still didn't work, right? And then you have to be nimble enough to say, okay, well, what's the next best plan that can't fail? Because I better come up with one really quickly, right? And so we've always learned in our company to pick 2 or 3 plans that can execute in parallel if necessary, even because even though one of them, we have our best one, it's like Murphy's law. It's just like sometimes that just is a complete failure. We have to switch gears really quickly. So that's something that I've experienced a lot as an entrepreneur, and it's worked well for us to plan for failure. And but when we succeed, kind of look over our shoulder and say, "Great, that we're so glad that worked." Is there someone chasing us? So that's kind of been our life.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I think it's just persistence, honestly. As long as you win more than you lose, you're in business, right?
Yeah.
So you have that going for you. But it has to be persistence. Like you're gonna have so many different negatives hitting you at all angles. When I was going through basic training many years ago, there was a drill sergeant who always just told us about self-motivation and how there was a forced march and the North Koreans were always this is like back in the 60s, I guess. They always had loudspeakers giving demoralizing messages to the troops, and those who listened slowed down and eventually died or captured. Those who did not listen and were self-motivated kept up the pace and were able to get to their destination to fight another day. That story may have been embellished as far as I know, but it really taught me about, self-motivation and just taking it one step at a time. No matter what you hear, no matter what you experience, no matter what you perceive, just keep going, right? And that's been the biggest driver that I've seen with every entrepreneur that I've seen that was a peer of mine. Not many of them are in business now, but or they're, they sold quickly and then they're now employees somewhere. But each one of them eventually just kind of slowed down, and they gave up and they listened to whatever they were hearing, and they decided to toss in the towel.
Are you a small business owner who is ready to take your professional growth to the next level? Sign up to the Grow a Small Business weekly newsletter. This is your go-to email every Friday and will take about 2 minutes to read. Join the Grow a Small Business community who, like you, are investing in their professional development. Each week, we curate valuable resources, whether it's expert advice, books, podcasts, industry insights, or actionable strategies. We've got you covered. Leave your email at growasmallbusiness.com/weekly.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
I've learned that in a non-VC backed company, in a bootstrapped company, that you're not going to be able to keep up with the salaries in the VC companies. You are not going to be able to keep the people that are attracted to that. The reward structure for those folks is oftentimes completely misaligned at a company that's bootstrapped versus one that is not. And the best thing you can do is find people who are passionate about what they're doing. I hear it, I've read it, I'm repeating it. Don't do what I do because I've made that mistake over and over and over, right? But finding the people that are passionate about the vision, or at least passionate to be part of someone else's vision, right? Maybe I find that to be the biggest win. I think that if they are, how do you put this? So different people have different risk tolerances. Not everyone can work for free or wait for that sale to come in to get themselves a check to pay the mortgage, right? So different people do have different financial needs. You'll be able to tell what is a real financial need, to stay alive, to stay healthy, to, not get the wife mad or the husband mad, things like that, keep the kids in school, whatever, versus they just, are looking for the biggest possible paycheck, right? When you're bootstrapped, almost all the value of the company is based off of the generous stock you're going to give them, which will one day be worth a lot of money or nothing at all, of course, but the value in that stock is really where they see the long-term play that goes with that vision completion. If it's just a paycheck, they're going to quit in 6 months anyway, and they're going to take whatever you built up with them along the way anyway, because for you, for them, there was no alignment on the passion, right? And so that's the difference. And I've learned to get people that are, maybe they're diamonds in the rough, maybe they're just in the rough, but that they, we've made good use of them. And over time, you'll work out whether or not they're what the company needs, but you've got a lot of good motivation in the meantime. And that's what's really important. And you'll get value out of that way beyond than some paycheck kind of chaser will give you.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I over communicate just about every time I can. Of course, if there's a misaligned vision, that can get you into trouble, right? But I always felt that, well, that's going to introduce weakness in the company in terms of, someone might leave and know something about the company or you or whatever. But by oversharing, the people that share the vision stay, right? And they feel empowered by the successes and the failures, right? Of course, if all you come at them is failures, then that's a different problem, right? For maybe a different podcast, right? But what we do is I overshare. I also treat my founders like future founders themselves, as in, starting their own venture. So I do things like I go over how like the QuickBooks works and how it looks. I show them contracts sometimes and say, look at this. I'm not showing you this to show you how evil people are or great or what we're getting. I'm showing you the mechanics of it, right? Because they can understand that I want to have enough money when I start slowing down, at least in the workforce, and speeding up on all the things I want to do, like, maybe waterboard or water skiing. I don't know, like snow surfboarding, but like what I want to do is I want to have enough money in my gas tank that when they are starting their own ventures, I know that I have invested in them already in how to run a business, at least the basics, and that I feel very comfortable investing in their next big idea. That's really what I see is I'm preparing to be an angel for them at their first venture and training them along the way. And that creates loyalty in a way that you're not going to get from a bigger company.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
I haven't.
Please, Ross.
I take time to always, go to like kids sports. I'll just shut down and go to that soccer game because I already know I'm working 7 days a week. I already doing, 16-hour days. So the company will still be there, right? There may be a fire to put out, but I'm not going to get that soccer game back. right? And so that musical back or whatever it is. I may be falling asleep sitting there on the sideline, but I'm there, right? I work hard to not be that dad, But that's one way I achieve balance. I also, as I said before, in cybersecurity, the world is very intangible. I can't say that every business is like that. There might be like a, I don't know, like a masonry company that's just growing phenomenally that you interview. For me, though, working on tangible things provides balance from the intangible things. I like doing that a lot. In the beginning, that meant I would actually weed my yard by hand, not because that's the best way to do it, not because I hate, I try to be pesticide free, but it was because it gave me something tangible to do, right? To focus on that I could look at after an hour and say, okay, I did that and the world doesn't care, but I care. And it's something in the world that I affected, right? Unlike maybe like a CFO's projections, which I modeled, like that's, who cares? Great for investors, but doesn't change the world, right? So those are the two ways I have balance in my life.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Not nearly enough. I continually fall into the trap of always needing to fight fires to grow the business, and always trying to actively grow the business every way I can. And so one of the challenges I've had is, which I'm sure that maybe the more well-funded folks maybe, don't have this problem as much, is that sitting down and having the discipline to read for a good, 2 hours a day, maybe even an hour a day, that's hard for me to do. That is astonishingly difficult for me to sit down, calm down, and do before I go to bed. That, of course, heaps all kinds of penalties on sleep patterns and things like that, right? But I need to do more of that. I need to do more reading. There's a one book I've been trying to get my hands on for a long time to read. The book's run on Amazon. It's a me problem, right? It's not an Amazon problem, And it is there's a book something about like all the questions you wish you could ask people but you can't as a founder, and that title always resonated with me because I've learned to always look, okay, how many agendas are in this room? So anyway, so that's my that is my growth moment that I'm sharing.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
I have, yeah. They're each good for a season, to be honest. Yeah, the needs of the company change over time. Always better to have more than one. I would say if the mentors or coaches are financially minded, then as in they're looking to maybe invest or whatever, try to figure out what makes them tick first, right? And then worry about, dumping all the problems that you haven't been able to talk to anyone about in 6 months, right? Because you don't know what their agenda is. And as CEO and as founder, usually that agenda is somehow not good for you or the company, right? And so you need to pick your coaches and mentors carefully and be ready to walk away from them. If you're not getting what you need, it might not be their fault at all. It just might just be a mismatch for what you need at that moment. And so, I have had them. I continue to grow more and change out people as the needs change. I have some of them from the beginning, right? And it's always great to get perspective. I always like to get people that are a little bit older. I should say a lot older. Here I am in my 40s, but a little bit older than me, maybe retired, because everything that's stressful for me, or it just reminds me of watching like parents with like new kids that are like, they're barely holding together and the kids are on a tantrum at a restaurant and the kid's like 4, right? And I'm thinking like, man, that's easy, and here they're having a hard time holding it together, right? And then I look at some of the older guys that have been around, they're just kind of putzing around now, for something to do. And they're like, oh yeah, I did this like back in the 70s, like and they're for them it's just Tuesday, right? And here you are all stressed out, So that perspective from time really can really benefit people that are entrepreneurs like us.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
I have a board of advisors. I do not have a grown out board of directors yet. One of the things that happened in our company, the way we grew, was that I hold almost all the shares. So whenever I have someone coming in to demand a board, like a director position, there's usually something else tied to that. And it's kind of like some kind of business transaction, right? Whereas I've always committed to listening and to having lots of conversations and oversharing, even if there's not an official position. And that's worked out well. It's also worked out well that with that company culture, that let's say there is some kind of investor who demands a board seat, I already have a corpus of founders who are fully knowledgeable on all the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything else in between, right? And I'm very confident that I can bring them on right away, if necessary, to make sure that the full representation of the company is on the board. So that's not a problem at all either, right? But it goes back to that oversharing. If you overshare and you provide consistency in your language, provide transparency, then you have a team of people that are willing to, help you enact a vision.
All right, Dennis, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
First thing is letting go of someone that you know is doing a good job, but the needs of the company have deviated enough from what they're providing. And so this is especially true for a product company, right? When there's no services bench to throw people on, right? So that's the hardest thing, honestly.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
There was a book I read a while ago that I thought was really good. It was Ready, Fire, Aim, I think is what it's called. That really helped me. We were trying to build a perfect product before going to market. That level of quality and perfection it works when you're doing like unlimited budget military kind of stuff for SEAL Team 6 or something. But that doesn't work when you're trying to quickly grow a small business, right? So that really helped me to assess the power, and that customers will let you make mistakes and they will know exactly where you're at, probably more than you know. And what they're looking for in a new product isn't perfection. It is, for you to go to market. So there's that bi-directional kind of courage and acceptance that's needed. So that book really kind of changed my opinion a lot on how I was going to market with a product, and it worked well for me.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I end up going to Y Combinator's. They have all those articles constantly going, the bubble to the top. I like reading them whenever I get a chance. There's a couple people that are on LinkedIn that I follow quietly, actually, that are, a lot of them are, a few of them are former hackers themselves, so, and they're a little bit irreverent, in their language, but they're consistent in their irreverency, right? And I've been described as an iconoclast myself. So for me, of course, being a CEO, that means you can't just make enemies everywhere all the time, right? But for me, it's good to watch them to get a dose of reality. And what I like to do is I like to watch to see if I'm on the wrong side of history there, and if I am, to quietly, take correction, through introspection. So that's what I like watching. And I won't share their names here, but I can give you the LinkedIn handles, of who I follow.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
I have been having a ton of success with Google Gemini, actually. However, that is a very powerful tool. It reminds me of being like, combat arms in the military, where you're given your gun, your rifle, and you quickly realize it's a very powerful tool that can end your life, a little bit dramatic. But I've been having a lot of fun with uploading all of my documentation. If you don't have it, then you gotta start writing it, right? But uploading all of my documentation, not to try to recreate something new, but what I like to see is I like to be able to create white papers, detailed white papers off of those. But if I see that the Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever is wrong, then that tells me there's a clarity missing in that thing that I know in my head that I need to get out there, right? So I almost use it as a how well am I communicating, in messaging tool, and that works really well for me. It's gotten a lot better because so have I, and then that's why, right? I use a lot now.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 11 years ago?
Wow, I stayed with government contracting and those products because it was familiar, and it was a easy source of revenue, right? I mean, it was hard work, but it was where I was. It's not where I needed to be. I would have said, move out of DC. You're trying to dream up a commercial product, and you need to get out of the ecosystem upon which you are not a part of. You're trying to get away from it. Stop being lazy. Have the courage to walk. So I should have moved away from the DC area in 2014, actually, moved over to somewhere else, anywhere else but the Beltway, right? To start from ground zero. Hard to do. I would have had to figure it out. But that, honestly, I wasted a good chunk of time trying to live in both worlds to create commercial products, and have a very jealous customer who wanted all of my time, right? And that doesn't work out in the end, right? You need to be able to make that break. They called them golden handcuffs back when I was doing contracting. It very much was that, in that my attention was divided. And for bootstrapping a software product is hard enough and quickly growing. Doing that with one eye on government contract and for someone else's IP, right, and your own, that's an unwinnable strategy.
Thanks so much for your time today, Dennis. Really enjoyed our chat. You started a cybersecurity business in 2014, mainly focusing on government contracts. Then in 2020, moved your focus to solely on security software, doing around $1.2 million recurring revenue at the moment. getting the team up to 30, now down to 10 with that focus on the SaaS product. So congratulations on the growth.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Troy.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.